I'm here to tell a user story about critical infrastructure resiliency. The critical infrastructure is the industrial base on which the competitiveness and security of a nation are dependent. The current state of a nation's critical infrastructure is at risk. The internet has become the central nervous system of a nation, both public and private. A nation's critical infrastructure continues to be vulnerable to natural disasters and cascading cybersecurity attacks. In fact, software has become the critical infrastructure within the critical infrastructure, said Alan Salisbury of the Center for National Software Studies. The overall demonstration of the mission to achieve critical infrastructure resilience is being initiated in three parts: the composition of a user story and the subject of today's presentation, the preparation of a software systems architecture, and the project plan in terms of principles and foundations in the way of working. It is in the context of software engineering methods and technology, SEMAT, and its Essence Kernel, framed by Ivar Jacobson, that the user story on the critical infrastructure resilience is being demonstrated. While the critical infrastructure being framed is influenced by thinking in the United States, nations around the world share many of the common challenges discussed and may find the approaches and prescriptions useful. Following a summary opening, I will discuss the challenges of the critical infrastructure with particular focus on the banking and finance sector cascade and propagation risk, the dimensions of resiliency, a maturity framework for assuring resiliency under stress, the model-based systems architecture that frames the solution, and the outlook for adopting the strategies and tactics outlined here. The internet has become the central nervous system of the nation, both private and public. It is controlled and driven by systems of systems and their underlying complex, large-scale, real-time software systems. The nation's critical infrastructure continues to be vulnerable to natural disasters and cascading cybersecurity attacks. Many industry sectors continue to stand naked to the wind. Is there an elephant in the room? There is if you answer yes to the question, should an organization put data or information it cannot afford to lose on the internet? The answer is no if you are willing to shift the paradigm of cybersecurity blame from supplier to user. Why is this shift necessary? Well, the internet was established to disseminate data and information. The internet is not equipped to control, secure, or protect the data and information being disseminated. In actual fact, the data and information that is transferred about on the internet is not under control, is not secure, and is not protected beyond the due diligence associated with backup and recovery operations. Private industry controls 80 to 85% of the critical infrastructure. Consequently, private industry must adopt resilience as an essential ingredient of competitiveness, with the expectation of boosting brand value. The critical infrastructure protection (CIP) model is insufficient. In addition to CIP, a critical infrastructure resilience (CIR) model needs to be adopted. We need to move from the static lock and chain protection beyond the combination lock to the strategy of a chessboard with moving parts capable of anticipating, avoiding, withstanding, mitigating, and recovering from the effects of threats and vulnerabilities. We need to shift the locus of control for the nation's cybersecurity from protection to resilience. The Timex slogan, "Take a licking and keep on ticking," demonstrates resilience in the absence of protection. If we want to avoid taking a licking, we need to have both protection and resilience. Achieving resiliency within the critical infrastructure through public-private partnerships is insufficient. The first stage approach to protecting the nation's critical infrastructure was unilateral mandated action. This was met with a stonewall by industry. This has given way to a second stage, consensus approach, achieved through public-private partnerships organized around industry sectors. There is now concern that the effectiveness of this approach is limited, as those involved in assuring this protection have adopted a go-along, get-along posture and are drifting towards complacency. While this approach may be effective in addressing the needs within an industry sector stovepipe, it is proving ineffective in addressing the needs that cross-cut industry sectors. It is time to consider a third stage approach to better address the cross-cutting issues, one based on incentives facilitated through public policy measures and perhaps some regulation. Connect the dots, permitting the industry sectors of the critical infrastructure to focus only on protection and not resilience, is facilitated by public-private partnerships that don't cope with cross-cutting issues. Public-private partnerships are needed because industry dominates the critical infrastructure, not government. Private industry is reluctant to share information, so that the challenge of connecting cross-sector dots remains. Government still struggles to provide the incentives needed to coax industry cooperation. Unwilling to provide indemnification as an incentive, the government is only willing to offer tax incentives, targeted investment, and insurance, and so the standoff. In short, like the critical infrastructure sectors themselves, the government has become just another silo. A concerted action program is needed to overcome these problems and to break out of the current state. Measuring maturity in the assurance of resiliency would impact the nation's critical infrastructure by accelerating the paradigm shift from critical infrastructure protection, CIP, to critical infrastructure resilience, CIR. A resiliency maturity framework would drive the business case and enterprise commitment towards the assurance of software security, business continuity, system survivability, and system of systems resiliency. The deployment challenge here is to get the gears to engage. The lubricant required is indemnification. Deployment of the maturity framework would be accelerated by selecting the right mix of public policy measures from among market-driven tactics, self-help remedies, targeted investment, insurance mechanisms, import tariffs, tax policy, guiding regulations, and targeted legislation. The right mix, not yet found, would accord as much self-determination as possible and invoke as little regulation as necessary. Balancing the duality of market-driven incentives and regulatory measures is a challenge, one that requires a high degree of sophistication. The result would improve security and competitiveness. The enterprise that achieves resilience will boost its reputation and enhance the value of its brand. Being resilient pays direct dividends to competitiveness. The resiliency of the nation's critical infrastructure is not simply an issue of homeland security. It is an issue of national defense. The health and status of the private sector and even its behavior have long been connected with national preparedness. The National Defense University was established half a century ago by President Eisenhower to ensure that the industrial base was capable of meeting national security and defense needs, as well as the competitiveness needs of the country. Achieving maturity in the assurance of resiliency within the critical infrastructure will help safeguard the nation and advance its global competitiveness. This is a wake-up call. Let's review the resiliency challenges of the critical infrastructure. The critical infrastructure is composed of the numerous industry sectors that do the heavy lifting. Some key sectors are listed here. Utilities and energy contain power generation and distribution systems. nuclear power control systems, and energy resource allocation systems. Telecommunications contain network control and switching systems, satellite control and management systems, and mobile communication systems and protocols. Banking and finance contain electronic commerce and electronic funds transfer systems, transaction processing systems, security and privacy management systems, and network management systems. Transportation contains route management and collision avoidance systems, avionics systems, air traffic control systems, navigation and position location systems, and embedded automobile control systems. Medical systems contain medical device control systems, patient record systems, and insurance and payment systems. The operations within the industry sectors of the critical infrastructure are diverse and complex. These industry sectors comprise an accidental system of systems that intersect operationally without a plan and design in advance. Each sector system was constructed within its own context and culture. In operation, these sector systems may inadvertently impose their own context and culture on others and clash with uncertain and unintended operational results. Industry sector practice varies widely in their domain engineering approaches, resulting in diversity in architecture, models, and patterns, including their representation. Formality within an architectural framework facilitates the imposition of distributed supervisory control, interoperability, and operation sensing and monitoring protocols. Industry sector maturity in management and engineering processes varies widely, resulting in diversity in configuration management, frequency of release, conformance to requirements, and traceability among lifecycle artifacts. Strong code management practices facilitate reconfiguration and reconstitution. Industry sector practice varies widely in fielding and operating practices, resulting in diversity and accountability and control, supply chain management, civility and pushback, and willingness to expend off-the-clock effort. Exercising strong control over the workforce facilitates business continuity and survivability. Industry sector impacts from government regulation vary with respect to export control, tax policy, intellectual property, privacy, and antitrust litigation. Exercising strong government control facilitates compliance for the benefit of the commons at the expense of initiative for the self-interest. Industry sector public expectation and confidence vary with respect to trust, loyalty, and satisfaction. The financial and medical sectors depend on public trust. The electrical and telecommunications sectors depend on customer loyalty and satisfaction. If the critical infrastructure is to be resilient, its sector managers and systems must respond to guidance from intelligent middlemen whose influence is felt before, during, and after a crisis. Intelligent middlemen possess the broad range of hard and soft skills spanning the cultural, ethical, legal, business, process, management, and engineering dimensions needed to meet the challenges of the critical infrastructure in anticipating, avoiding, minimizing, withstanding, and recovering from cross-cutting effects and to impede the emergence of propagating and cascading effects. The intelligent middlemen are positioned at the center of things and serve as the traffic cop for identifying and driving resolution of cross-cutting issues. From this vantage point, the intelligent middlemen are able to obtain superior situation awareness. For example, they ensure that recovery time objectives are coordinated, interoperability protocols are followed, distributed supervisory control functions are coordinated, and operation sensing and monitoring functions are applied. Beyond just the critical infrastructure, the Homeland Security Information Network, shown here, begins to capture the broader demand for resiliency. Here we need to strike an intelligent balance between two extremes, where no one knows everything and where everyone knows everything. We need to adopt the intelligent middleman approach, where highly qualified middlemen know as much as possible, know how to acquire additional information, know how to connect the dots, and know how to act on what they know. Of the 36 entries comprising the communities of interest shown here, how many do you think are secure? Can anyone name one entry that is secure? Now consider the Homeland Security Information Network itself. To what extent is the network resilient? Just as important as the answer to the question is the means by which you arrived at the answer. How does one assess the assurance of resiliency? The intelligent middleman job specification is described as follows. Number 1, the intelligent middleman must be educated, trained, and in possession of the broad gauge experience to fill the role of Chief Critical Infrastructure Resilience Architecture and Operations Engineer. Number 2, as Chief Engineer, the intelligent middleman must be educated and trained in the prerequisite essentials of both systems engineering and software engineering, and have experience in how things are built and how things are used, from architecture through operations. Number 3, as a boundary spanner, the intelligent middleman must understand and be capable of planning and exercising command and control of the critical infrastructure under stress. Number 4, specifically, the chief engineer must manage the state transitions associated with its electrical grid and data transmission infrastructure, interoperability and information sharing protocols, cybersecurity framework, law enforcement and emergency services, sector coordinated recovery time objectives, cascade triggers, digital situation awareness, information and data recovery protocols, distributed supervisory command and control protocols, and supply chain logistics and risk management. Number 5, the intelligent middleman must maintain the foremost focus on the goal of anticipating, avoiding, withstanding, mitigating, and recovering from the effects of adversity, whether natural or man-made, under all circumstances of use. Let's look more closely at the banking and finance sector and the cascade and propagation risk it faces. The banking and finance sector illustrates the stovepipe culture, environment, and technological vulnerabilities that stand ready to trigger societal impact. Its institutional dependence on public trust and its operational dependence on electrical and telecom resilience under stress, with its tightly coordinated recovery time objectives, make it vulnerable. In banking and finance, the financial services industry depends on a network of systems that process instruments of monetary value in the form of deposits, loans, funds transfer, savings, and other financial transactions. The network is composed of banks, other depository institutions, and the Federal Reserve System, as well as underwriters, brokerages, and mutual funds. In addition, there are industry utilities, including the New York Stock Exchange, the Automated Clearinghouse, Depository Trust Clearinghouse Corporation, and the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, as well as underlying third-party electronic processing services. Clearing and settlement systems are the most critical business operations at risk for financial markets, and the disruptions of clearing and settlement processes would have on an immediate systemic effect on critical financial markets. The use of the term systemic risk is based on the international definition of systemic risk in payments and settlement systems. The Federal Reserve Board specified that the following functions are critical to the operation and liquidity of banks and stability of financial markets and require same-day recovery. Large value interbank funds transfer, securities transfer, or payment-related services such as Fedwire, clearinghouse interbank payment system, Depository Trust Clearinghouse Corporation, and the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, automated clearinghouse operators, key clearing and settlement utilities, Treasury automated auction and processing system, large dollar participants of these systems, and utilities. The banking sector depends on maintaining the trust of the banking community and the banking public. In large measure, this trust is maintained through the transparency and verification inherent in exchanges. Without this trust, the banking system itself risks anarchy. Under what circumstances might the trust in the banking system be tested and stressed? At the close of each business day, it is the expectation and practice of the banking community that the banking ledgers of branch offices be reconciled and balanced to the penny, and that securities and trading firms create a daily profit and loss statement. Under what circumstances of use might the banking ledgers be thrown out of balance, impacting the daily closing and settlement process, and the next day opening? More specifically, what is the least cybersecurity exploit capable of impacting next day closing? Overall, the stock exchanges and their associated clearinghouses have performed due diligence and taken the steps necessary to ensure the resilience of their operations. The attribute of resiliency is an emerging property of large, complex, software-intensive systems. Let's put a fine edge on the dimensions of resiliency. One respected researcher seemed to concede the high ground of resiliency, that is, avoidance, in associating resilience with the Timex slogan, "Take a licking and keep on ticking." The question then becomes, what perimeter is being secured? In protecting a network node or a physical facility in a geographic region, each node or facility is to be protected and made survivable. In achieving resilience, propagation and cascading effects across the network and region must also be curtailed. This is made difficult by the context and culture challenges of the industry sectors within the critical infrastructure. The capabilities needed to impact cross-cutting issues cannot be expected to evolve in a loosely coupled environment. They must be holistically specified, architected, designed, implemented, and tested if they are to operate with resilience under stress. A management, process, and engineering maturity framework is necessary to advance the assurance of software security, business continuity, system survivability, and system of systems resiliency capabilities. Resiliency is the ability to anticipate, avoid, withstand, minimize, and recover from the effects of adversity, whether natural or man-made, under all circumstances of use. Resiliency applied to a system of systems focuses on cross-cutting issues. Cross-cutting effects stem from dependent relationships. Some dependent relationships are planned and intended interactions between industry sectors, such as financial transactions embedded in telecommunications, electrical, transportation, and medical operations. Other dependent relationships are indirect and stem from outsourced commoditized services that bring with it opportunities for common single-point failures among industry sectors, such as the Internet, the Global Positioning System, Federal Express, IBM, and Microsoft. Goals vary among industry sectors. For example, ensure continuous operation, that is, Backup mission critical operation. Be able to open the market the next day, that is, shut down in the face of adversity to avoid cleanup and reconstitution. Trust in information through information assurance. Security vendors and suppliers have concentrated on delivering protection and have succeeded in commoditizing this space with cost-effective offerings, since protection continues to be viewed as a cost. Suppliers depend on protection being viewed as a cost. In this way, they can compete on cost, not the degree of protection afforded. Protection does not yield 100% security, ensuring a persistent demand for security protection products and services. On the other hand, consumers who are users of software and information technology need cross-cutting resilience, not just the protection that stovepipe solutions can provide. Resilience is considered an investment, and consumer CEOs must take ownership for the enterprise cybersecurity solutions that are needed to extend defense in depth to business continuity, system survivability, and system of systems resilience. Resiliency applied to the nation's critical infrastructure is trustworthiness under stress and spans high availability, continuous operations, and disaster recovery. The immediate thrust to combat cybersecurity impacts needs to shift beyond controlling threats and vulnerabilities to the engineering challenge of assuring resilience throughout the nation's critical infrastructure. Assurance provides justifiable confidence that software will function as intended. Assurance is demonstrated through model-based business, technical, and operational claims spanning management, process, and engineering arguments and model-based evidence. Let's look at how resiliency can be achieved in systems of systems using the maturity framework for assuring resiliency under stress. The maturity framework for assuring resiliency under stress delivers value through management, process, and engineering capabilities and solutions that address security, continuity, survivability, and resiliency. The system perimeter focus areas include commitment to a business case, security in depth, business continuity, and survivability. The essential focus areas needed to extend this perimeter to the system of systems context needed to demonstrate resiliency include coordinated recovery time objectives, interoperable information and data exchange, operation sensing and monitoring, distributed supervisory control, and information and data recovery. To achieve maturity in the assurance of resiliency under stress, the enterprise must satisfy the goal-based argument at each level. The objective of the maturity framework for assuring resiliency is to drive the business case and enterprise commitment towards the assurance of software security, business continuity, system survivability, and system of systems resiliency. Level 1 is a state of affairs where there is inability to advance and exhibiting evidence of apathy, denial, management inaction, and lack of engineering know-how. The Level 2 goal is to demonstrate commitment to security assurance through strategic management, internal processes, and defense in depth. How is commitment achieved, quantified, and expressed? Commitment is achieved by coping with the stresses and conflicts between competitiveness and security. Commitment is quantified by calculating security return on investment in terms of preparation and incident costs, cleanup costs, lost opportunity costs, and reconstitution costs. Commitment is expressed through a Chief Security Officer leadership program and security assurance operations. The Level 3 goal is to demonstrate business continuity assurance through compliance management, external processes, and product engineering. How is business continuity achieved? Business continuity begins by focusing on supply chain management, including global sourcing and open source. It extends to regulatory compliance and aspect oversight and assessment. Business continuity culminates in the systematic crisis management steps of prevention and response that sustain stability or result in a return to stability. The Level 4 goal is to demonstrate the achievement of system survivability through the management of faults and failures, sustainability processes, and reliability, maintainability, and availability engineering. Central to system survivability is resistance and recognition of cyber attack or cyber threat and the recovery and reconstitution of enterprise operations following. The Level 5 goal is to demonstrate the achievement of systems resiliency through the management of external interactions and dependencies, the control of distributed supervisory processes, and the practice of next-generation software engineering. A defined engineering challenge of adopting resilience throughout the nation's critical infrastructure is needed. The recovery time objectives among industry sectors must be coordinated. Interoperability of information sharing and platform operations must be assured. Distributed supervisory control protocols must be in place. Operation sensing and monitoring must be embedded. And digital situation awareness must be enabled. Let's look at the model-based software systems architecture that delivers the solution. The systems of systems architecture and engineering operational concept underlying resiliency under stress is shown here. Interoperability, operation sensing and monitoring, and coordinated recovery time objectives form the foundation for digital situation awareness. Intelligent middlemen, response tactics, the identification of cascade triggers, and information and data recovery tactics form the ingredients for distributed supervisory control. A nation's critical infrastructure is composed of systems of systems. Resilience in the critical infrastructure can be reasoned about using the systems coupling diagram framed by Harold Budd Lawson. The model is composed of a situation system, an interacting respondent system, and systems assets, instantiated for use as services as needed by the respondent system in its interaction with the situation system. The systems coupling diagram is a template and pattern for software systems architecture of all kinds. A resilient software system architecture based on the systems coupling diagram would be capable of delivering a resilient critical infrastructure system of systems. In accordance with the systems coupling diagram, the software systems architecture for critical infrastructure resilience calls for the allocation of control, function, persistent data, and assets. The architecture rules of construction associated with each factor are shown in the table. Intelligent middlemen in the situation system control the critical infrastructure sector transition from normal mode to shutdown, alternate site, or alternate mode, using the tools of the respondent system associated with digital situation awareness and distributed supervisory control. Critical infrastructure sectors perform their sector functions as part of the situation system, relying on the respondent system for operation sensing and interoperability. Persistent data is held and managed locally by the critical infrastructure sectors, relying on the respondent system for coordinated recovery time objectives, management and control of cascade triggers, and information and data recovery. System assets associated with security, business process continuity, and system survivability are accessed, instantiated, and consumed by the situation system and the respondent system. System assets performs no control, function, or persistent data actions. In accordance with the systems coupling diagram, The software systems architecture for critical infrastructure resilience calls for the following allocation of control, functions, and persistent data and assets. The situation system is populated with the man-made critical infrastructure sectors and the intelligent middlemen control node. The respondent system is populated with the Level 5 System of Systems Resiliency Engineering mission focus areas intended to interact with the situation system and its intelligent middlemen in anticipating, avoiding, withstanding, mitigating, and recovering from the effects of adversity under all circumstances of use. The system assets is populated with the Level 2 through 4 facilities focus areas and their services to be instantiated by the respondent system in its interaction with the situation system and its critical infrastructure sectors. More specifically, the critical infrastructure situation system is composed of utilities and energy, banking and finance, medical systems, transportation, and telecommunications, as well as public health, food and agriculture, federal agency, regional response, emergency response, and intelligent middlemen control node. Each sector of the situation system is composed of the control, functions, and persistent data and assets local to the sector. The respondent system is engineered as a system of systems architecture composed of coordinated recovery time objectives, interoperable information and data exchange, operations sensing and monitoring, digital situation awareness, distributed supervisory control, and information and data recovery. The situation system is composed of the control, functions, and persistent data and assets of the global system of systems. The system assets include services and facilities to be instantiated by sector, including enterprise security commitment management services, enterprise business continuity services, and system survivability engineering services. The system assets is composed of the facilities and service assets made available to situation system and its sectors by the respondent system. Let's briefly review the outlook going forward. Whether you establish criteria at the beginning of a project or not at all, there exists industrial strength objective criteria for learning the status of a project and pointing the way forward. These criteria can be found in the Software Engineering Method and Theory, SEMAT, formulation, and its Essence Kernel, the essence and common ground of software engineering and a major object management group, OMG, standards process. The customer space is framed by stakeholder shared vision for a well-conceived value proposition for the opportunity with convincing and consequential outcomes. The solution is bounded by stakeholder agreed-to requirements and user stories and a software system architecture that facilitates a stable and operational software product. The endeavor's work is performed by a well-selected and ready team and a way of working based on established principles and foundations. As the twig is bent, so grows the tree. So to get your project off on the right foot, expectations should be set and evidence should be sought on the following assertions and principles based on the following alpha state checkpoints. Number 1, stakeholders are in agreement and share a vision for the project. Number 2, an opportunity value proposition has been established and there is stakeholder shared vision for achieving it. Number 3, requirements or user stories are coherent and acceptable, and there is stakeholder shared vision for them. The software system architecture is selected and comprises a domain-specific architecture to guide software system implementation, and the software system implementation is made ready and operational with no technical debt. Number 5, the team operates in collaboration shares a vision for the project, and is ready to perform with respect to shared vision, software engineering process, software project management, software product engineering, operations support, and domain-specific architecture, processes, methods, and tools. Number 6, the way of working by the team has established foundations for software engineering process, software project management, and software product engineering and operations support. Number 7, the work is started only when all is prepared, including coherent requirements and acceptable user stories, stakeholders in agreement, and an established foundation for the way of working. All work products are prepared and inspected in accordance with a defined standard of excellence, assuring completeness, correctness, and consistency. Certain selected milestone states serve as indicators of project success. When completion of these states and their stages is neglected or postponed, the outcome of the project is placed at risk. The figure presents the selected milestone states critical to success on a project. As mentioned earlier, the overall demonstration of the mission to achieve critical infrastructure resilience is being initiated in 3 parts: the composition of a user story, which is the subject of today's presentation, the preparation of a software systems architecture, and the project plan in terms of principles and foundations in the way of working. The state of this demonstration for requirements, software systems architecture, way of working, and others are shown here, with the current state of progress in italics type and next steps shown underlined. Stakeholder has been recognized, that is the critical infrastructure sectors. It now needs to be represented by individuals pursuing this vision. Opportunity has been identified, and clearly software is needed. A value proposition needs to be established that will rally the stakeholders to see it to a conclusion. The requirements have been conceived, they've been bounded, they are coherent. It remains to review that with the stakeholders in the context of the value proposition to ascertain that they are acceptable. The software system has an architecture selected, and that architecture needs to be demonstrable as the next step. The team needs to be selected going forward. The way of working principles have been established, foundations have been established, and we now need to put all of that in use and press forward in the form of a project. The work has been identified, but it remains to be initiated. The work product has been identified, and it needs to be initiated so we can move forward. This concludes the presentation of the user story with respect to the critical infrastructure resilience. The third challenge is to structure the software development plan as an incremental development with well-specified design levels and incremental releases, each with fine-grained cost accounts, formal software inspections of design-level artifacts, careful management and visibility of systems engineering to be determined items, and a relentless focus on the innovation needed to meet the challenges of resiliency. The work breakdown structure for critical infrastructure resilience, based on the cleanroom software engineering way of working, is shown in the figure. Created by J. Seward Johnson, Jr., the Awakening is a 100-foot statue of a giant, embedded in the earth, struggling to free himself. It was installed at Haynes Point in East Potomac Park, Washington, D.C. in 1980 for the International Sculpture Conference exhibition. It is fitting that the invisible hand of the market with its market-driven incentives, specifically indemnification, are what is now needed to free the critical infrastructure from its stovepipe thinking and complacency. Achieving maturity in the assurance of resiliency throughout the critical infrastructure will help safeguard the nation's critical infrastructure and advance its global competitiveness. The key to genuine and effective public-private partnerships is indemnification. To unlock the door to critical infrastructure resiliency, use the key labeled indemnification. Beyond an understanding of the critical infrastructure and its sector domains, the software and systems coupling architecture, and the software engineering way of working, the key to the critical infrastructure resiliency is indemnification that unlocks the value proposition and willingness for cooperation and sharing among all participants. Resiliency is the high ground. Claim it. Make your move. Here is my contact information. I would be happy to receive questions and have discussions with people on this important subject.